everybody to the Inside Pass episode number 2 of our relaunch here. I'm Randy alongside Tom Baker, and we welcome you to the second edition of the Inside Pass. We're going to kick things off. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff tonight, including the All-Star race, because obviously this is All-Star weekend in Charlotte, and so we can't get away without talking about the All-Star race. But we want to kick things off with our first guest, or I guess our guest for the evening, our featured guest of the night. He actually was last on our show February 24th, 2015, which was a big date for him because 2 days before that, he actually went out and won the Xfinity Series race in the Roush number 16 car with Lilly Diabetes behind the sponsorship for that car. He came on our show a couple of days later and had a lot of success in doing so. And he was actually scheduled to be on our show the second time he won, but then we didn't have a show. So hopefully it's a reversal of fortune this time, and this time he can be on the show and then go win, because that's usually how it happens. But anyway, he is this year he's driving a part-time schedule for DGR Crosley and the 17 truck. We welcome Ryan Reed to the Inside Pass. Buddy, welcome back to the show. It's been a very long time. We are glad that you are back with us.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.
So as I mentioned, you were last on the show February 24th, 2015. That was a significant date a couple of days before that because you won your first Xfinity Series race. You were on the show a couple of days later, so obviously we talked about the win. But since that time, you actually went out and won another ARCA race, or won your first ARCA race, and then turned around and won the Xfinity Series race, I guess, the year after that, 2016, because it was 2 in a row. So talk a little bit about what it meant to win at Daytona, not once, but twice.
Yeah, obviously those are extremely special. You know, the Daytona wins are so tough to come by. You know, so much has to go right, and you know, I mean, obviously a fast car, but you know, I mean, even with a fast car, you know, it just seems like you can go there and race, you know, 1,000 times, and it just never be your day, and you know, to have that happen twice, and to feel like it was my day or our day. You know, like I said, not once but twice. It was really cool, and whatever happens in my career, whatever else happens in my career, those will be, you know, extremely special memories. And my parents, who have been unbelievable supporters of mine for forever, they were there for both of them. And so, you know, the victory lane photos are, you know, I come across them every once in a while. I have a few pictures hanging up in my office, and that's the trophies. And you know, those are the things that you get to stop and remember. And you know, obviously, you know, through my career, everyone's heard me talk a lot about being diagnosed with diabetes, and that first one was just like, you know, just made everything, all the trials and all the hard times, feel like it was so worth it.
Did you sort of, in a way, with the first one, Ryan, did it take you until the second one for the first one to really sink in? Because I feel like I watch a lot of drivers. I've watched a lot of drivers across the years. They'll start racing in a certain division and they win the big race so quickly that it's almost like it happened too fast, and then they weren't able to win it again. Did it take you really until the second time you won for the first time to have the full meaning?
You know, I think I talked to, I mean, it was kind of ironic or really pretty cool about both wins. Was Kevin Harvick was in the broadcast booth calling the race, and Kevin, you know, obviously we're both from Bakersfield, and
sure.
But you know, I mean, there's a lot of history there. My dad used to race out on the West Coast, and in what's now the K&N West Series. Back then it was Winston West, and he used to sweep the floors of my dad's shop. So there's a lot of history there. But you know, Kevin said it best at the end of my second win that, you know, the first win, you know, I kind of, you know, I put myself in good position, and then just kind of found myself in the lead at the end of that thing, and you know, obviously made the right decisions and made the right moves to maintain the lead. But you know, it was a lot of fortune went into it. And then the second win, you know, it seemed like, and he said it best, you know, just really went out and earned that one. You know, had to work so hard. Came back from a ton of controversy. I think I spun out 2 or 3 times. Had to come from the back to the front. Had an extremely fast race car, and really knew what to do with it. And, I think that was the main differences. And the second one, I think that it meant more to me. It's hard to say that it meant more because the first one's so special, but I just felt like I walked away from there and was like, that was something to be proud of,
Right. Everybody talks about how Daytona, a lot of fans will say, oh, well, he won Daytona, but Daytona doesn't mean anything. Anybody can win at Daytona. How much of a mental, game is it to be able to win at a track like Daytona? Because I feel like if you can win at Daytona, you can win pretty much anywhere, because Daytona is one of the hardest tracks on the circuit to be able to visit Victory Lane. There's drivers that have been in the sport for 20 years and haven't won Daytona yet. So just talk about the mental capacity, the mental game that you have to go through during the course of a race, because you, in both of your races at Daytona, you were one of the fastest cars the entire race. So it wasn't like you just got lucky and ended up in first. You were in first for most of both of those races. So
yeah, I think that it's kind of a catch-22 because you have two dynamics there going on. I guess one dynamic that kind of you can look at in a couple of different ways. You obviously have it's a level playing field. You have a lot of guys that are in contention to win those things, which obviously makes it a little more difficult because anyone can win. But on the other side of that, it does level the playing field, and equipment seems like it kind of takes a back seat, and the next thing you can find yourself in a great position, in a position that maybe if the team's behind on a short track or an intermediate, you wouldn't find yourself in.
Yeah,
but I think you've seen over the last couple of years it's not as simple as just going out there, getting in front, and riding around. It takes a lot to be able to get out front and like you said, stay up front. That's the biggest thing. Is how do you get to lead? That's one thing, but keeping it and making the right moves and listening to your spotter is such a different animal.
Truly a mental game of chess.
Oh yeah. Very high speed chess.
So you had Lilly Diabetes on for the 2 seasons that you ran for Roush. What was the atmosphere like at Roush? Long before you guys obviously found out that Lilly Diabetes wasn't going to come back at the end of last year. So what was it like being in the Roush camp? Because I know for a lot of old school fans, they're used to the Mark Martin and the Matt Kenseth days when Roush was the dominant force. And over the last several years, they've had some things go on in the organization that, you guys were fast one week, but then you guys were struggling the next week, and then, other weeks you guys were fast for several weeks, and now they've kind of done away with everything but the COAT program. So kind of, talk about what it was like to work with Jack Roush and then have these guys, that, as the older veterans in the sport coming through and being able to bounce ideas and bounce thoughts off of them during your time with Roush.
Yeah, I mean, being at Roush for 5 years, there was a lot of ups and downs. There was a lot of good times. There was, the highlights obviously with the wins. But I think my time at Roush, I learned so much. There's such veteran leadership over there. Obviously you have Jack. You have, there was guys like Matt, Ricky Stenhouse, who I still train with him at his gym there in Mooresville. He's been just an unbelievable. He was and still is an unbelievable mentor, and can't say enough about the leadership and where watching his growth as well. In the Cup Series and as a teammate and as a mentor and all that. And then you had Greg there for a part of the time when I first got started there. Carl Edwards was there. I mean, so the list goes on and on of guys that I was able to learn from and feed off of, and it was such a roller coaster ride in a lot of ways, because like you said, the performance wasn't there like it was in the early 2000s to late 2000s, but regardless, the equipment was still good equipment, and the work ethic was there, and I just it's a time that obviously I'll cherish forever.
Right.
It was an interesting time, too, because I think the Xfinity Series kind of took a different step in that time period where you had even more influence from some of the Cup teams, and you had a lot of the Cup drivers that were running more and more of the races. I mean, you were competing against some of the best there was, and you were showing that you belonged. What was it like for you to be able, even though it wasn't in the Cup Series or hasn't been yet, to be able to actually be on the same track with the guys like Kyle Busch and some of the other drivers?
Yeah, I actually put out a tweet a while back, and it's the ongoing discussion, right, of, where, how much should the Cup guys, be in the Xfinity Series, and, what is that fair to the other guy, to the Xfinity Series regulars, and so on and so forth. And, my standpoint is, as a driver, it is unbelievable what you can learn from those guys racing against them week in and week out. It's just, there's nothing to compare it to. When it doesn't matter what you're doing, if it's simple as going down pit road, or if it's, side drafting and how aggressive they are, or if it's, obviously watching their consistency lap in and lap out as far as, that they're aligned and being able to hit the same marks every single lap. The list just goes on and on about what they're able to do as race car drivers. And, I think that, it's, guys that haven't got a chance to race around, the Kyle Busch's, Brad Keselowski's, there's a huge difference. And when you do get the opportunity to race around them, you better soak it in, because there's so much to learn.
Yeah, so we mentioned Lilly Diabetes, of course, pulling out of the sport at the end of last year, leaving you seemingly without a ride, but then you landed back on your feet with DGR. Kind of talk about the transition between, learning about Lilly Diabetes, not coming back, leaving Roush, and then getting the part-time ride with DGR this year.
Yeah, obviously it was devastating to learn that they were exiting the sport, and they're no longer going to be my sponsor. It was a tremendous 5 years, and when they first sponsored me, I was, no one knew who I was. I didn't have much of a background, and they just took a shot on me, and to go out and be an ambassador for them, and to be able to have that partnership allowed me to go racing, allowed me to go compete for Roush Fenway for 5 years. And when they left in almost November of last year, it just really left me at a critical time where driver lineups are pretty much set for the next year, and it's really hard to put a sponsorship deal together in 60 to 90 days to be able to get to be able to go full-time racing the next year. And that's really the key to the sport, is being able to have sponsorship. And so while they were an unbelievable partner, obviously it was really sad, and definitely a huge bummer to learn that they were leaving so late in the year.
Well, talk about that dynamic to switching to DGR, because you sort of came from Roush, where you're leaning on a whole bunch of veterans, to coming to DGR and a seemingly younger truck audience, where you're sort of the person that's ran these tracks a lot. What was it like working with the younger crew like Ankrum and Alfredo? What was it like working with those guys just coming into the sport?
Yeah, it's dramatically different, and it's all the little things too. Coming from the Xfinity Series to the Truck Series, just as much as I feel like I had a tremendous amount of experience, but also too, it's learning a different dynamic. Less engineers, more of a traditional grassroots type of racing, which is awesome. It's what I grew up doing. And then I was used to having guys with a ton of experience around me, and then I was a guy with a ton of experience. But it was the guys at DGR are an awesome group. I can't say enough about them and what what they do as a group, and to watch the success they've had in such a short amount of time is pretty awesome. And I think that they've got a great thing going there as an organization, as a team, to be able to be competitive. And I know that my one race at Vegas with them turned into I think we really had a competitive race truck, and where we started in practice, we made gains all weekend long. And I know for me, I just want to go back and do it again, because I feel like if I get the opportunity with them, we could do a lot together and have a lot of success. But whether it's one race or 20, I'm just thankful for the opportunity.
One of the things that I have always enjoyed about watching you race is the fact that A, you're a very good race car driver, and B, I think you're an equally humble and really good person. And you've been a role model. You've been basically, when you call yourself a brand ambassador, you're really kind of an ambassador of hope for a lot of people with diabetes that, feel like, gee, I don't know if I could do this. You and, of course, Mr. Kimball on the IndyCar side have been, excellent brand ambassadors for the hope that, just because you have diabetes doesn't mean you have to limit yourself. You just have to do some things differently. Can you kind of walk us through, real quick before we let you go, what is a race day in the life of Ryan Reed with the diabetes? What obstacles did you have to deal with and overcome?
Yeah, it is a tall order. It's a lot of work, and I made the decision obviously very early in my my diagnosis that diabetes wasn't going to stop me. Even though I had doctors and different people telling me that I couldn't race anymore, and I knew that was going to come with a hefty challenge, but I felt like I was up for it. And it's obviously diabetes management, no matter the situation, no matter the whether you're topping a race car or just waking up and going to eat breakfast with your friends. It's a lot to think about. It's a lot to manage, and so it's obviously your diet is a huge part of that. And being able to know what you're putting in your body, then taking the right amount of insulin for the food you put in your body, and then watching your blood sugar. And thankfully, the technology has been astronomically growing at an astronomical rate. It's just in the 7-8 years that I've had diabetes, it's come so far. That the management has come so far. It's made it just a tremendous amount easier to go out and do everyday life. And Dexcom is a huge part of that. I actually, when I'm in the race car, I have my Dexcom mounted on the dash so that I can see what my blood sugar is at all times and know what it's doing. And that's obviously a key to being able to be in the race car. And then the next step is, being able to know what your blood sugar has been doing over the course of 3 months, and to know if you're healthy. And My Sugar is a great way. It's an app you can have on your phone that allows you to know what your A1C is, which is unbelievably helpful, not having to go to the doctor's office to know what that is. But just so much to think about, so much to prepare for, which obviously there's a lot of that goes into driving a race car even without diabetes. So throw that in the mix, and you have a like I said, tall order.
Yeah. So before we came on the air, I was intrigued by the setup that you have in the car whenever you are actually getting ready to go in for a race. There's a whole setup that have to put into your car in order for you to be able to check your glucose and stuff while you're racing. I know you mentioned the Dexcom that you have on the dashboard to be able to check it. What all goes into being able for you to be comfortable inside that race car for the 2.5 or 3 hour race at a time?
Yeah, it's hydration's key. It gets so hot in those cars that you're losing on hot days 8 or 9 pounds, and so being able to replenish as much of those fluids as you can is crucial. And then the next step is like you said, knowing what your blood sugar is and knowing what you need to do. I always had a PICC member trained to give me an insulin injection if my blood sugar was too high during a race. And, that was more of a safety net. I did everything I could to be prepared, and thankfully never have had to do that. And that's, I think just dotting the I's and crossing the T's, is what it's all about, to being able to have successful diabetes management when you're in, strenuous times like that, whether you're working out or whether you're driving a race car for, 2.5, 3 hours.
So before we let you go, I wanted to have you mention your foundation, Ryan's Mission. Tell us a little bit about the foundation and how people can get more information about Ryan's Mission.
Yeah, Ryan's Mission really started as when I first started racing in ARCA, and right after I was first diagnosed. And it was really just a website to tell my story about not giving up on your dreams and continuing to do what you love despite having diabetes. And, it did a lot. It grew. We've done a lot of fundraisers, a lot of different things. Had a lot of different partners to help us along the way to be able to grow Ryan's Mission. So you can always learn more about it by going to Ryan'sMission.org and learn the different things that we're doing, and you know, have a lot of exciting things coming up this summer as far as going out into the and you know, spreading the message of you know, kind of a life without limits with diabetes, and that's where Ryan's Mission got started, and that's what we'll continue to do.
Well, Ryan, we're going to let you go. I know you're working on some stuff with DGR for the rest of 2019 and beyond, so whenever that stuff gets worked out, you're going to come back on and let us know what's going on, all right?
Yeah, absolutely. You guys will be the first stop.
All right. Thanks, Ryan, so much, and best of luck in whatever you do for the rest of 2019. If it's not in a truck, whatever it's in, best of luck to you.
I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, guys.
No problem. All right, that is Ryan Reed, and Ryan's a great guy. I love him.
He is. Yeah.
He's such a great advocate for people with diabetes, even if it's not diabetes, even if you just have, you know, asthma or, you know, whatever you may have, any habilitating thing that makes you think you can't do something, just look at Ryan Reed, and he's proof positive that you can do anything you want to in life.
Well, that's true. You know, anytime you see someone like Ryan who has to overcome an obstacle to be able to race, you know, you look at people like him. You know, I have a friend named Brandon Lovelace who races over in Memphis in a sprint car. He's, I think, 18. He's got cystic fibrosis. And again, what he has to overcome to be able to get in that sprint car and go racing is amazing. You know, it gives the rest of us motivation and hope that, you know what, we can overcome whatever challenges we have. And you know, I'm hoping to see Ryan back in something really soon, because I really feel like he showed great potential in the Roush car, and then, of course, in his one chance that he's had with DGR Crosley. But, you know, I think he suffered a little bit at the end of his career with Roush because they just didn't have the equipment.
Right.
You know, the equipment was good, but it wasn't what, you know, the Penske's and the Gibbs and that, or Junior Motorsports were. So I feel like if somebody put him in top equipment, he would be very successful, and I would believe he would be a sponsor's dream.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know?
Oh, yeah,
He's
for
got
sure.
the personality, and he enjoys going out and spreading the good news, and that's what it takes.
Well, I'm one of those people that I hate when teams grow too fast, and we've seen it time and time again. And I feel like Roush almost, they were already big, but I feel like they got themselves to a point where, because I had read a story a while back about how Roush was basically selling sponsorship at whatever he could in order to keep the teams going.
Yeah.
So there were times where I know, like Ryan Reed's team and even Buescher for a while, they had basically a different sponsor on the car every single week, because that's all that they could get out of the sponsor at the time.
Yeah.
And so Jack was selling his sponsorship so low that he was only getting basically basement level, you know, type of sponsorships, and he was basically only making enough to get the car to the track, and whatever money was made from the team just went right back into the car. So it was just you were always breaking even, you were never gaining any ground. But now that he's cut the Xfinity team completely out and he's only down to the two Cup teams, you can tell Ryan Newman and Ricky Stenhouse's performances have gotten so much better this year just in having two teams instead of four.
Well, I think that's a big part of it. I think personnel is another part of it. I think you know, the new package on the Cup side's a part of it. You know, I think there's a lot of factors that go into, I think, the improvement in Roush Fenway. But you're right, the performance is definitely better, and you brought Ryan Newman over, you brought Scott Graves into the organization, you made some fundamental changes with the 6 team to make that team way better than it was over the past few years. You know, I think Trevor Bayne kind of got unfairly scapegoated in that whole situation. You know, because
that's a story for another time.
Yeah, it is. But you know, Ryan really, I think, on the Xfinity side, went through a small microcosm of that too. Right. It wasn't that wasn't that the cars weren't good; they just weren't what they needed to be to race for wins. Mm-hmm. And you know, that comes with a lack of budget. You know, you can only do so much with what you have in the sport, and especially that level. So, you know, happy to hear that Ryan is so positive and so upbeat. And, you know, I was thinking that somebody like Ryan, even if he never ran another race again, he's won Daytona twice.
Yep.
I mean, that's a career
Yeah,
I don't care if
exactly.
it's Xfinity. That's a career.
Yeah, we talked with him about that earlier. I had mentioned, there's drivers, Tony Stewart, who never won the Daytona 500. I mean,
Mark Martin.
Right. I mean, there's guys that have never won at Daytona
Bunches.
before.
Yep.
And then there's other guys, like Trevor Bayne won his very first attempt. But I mean, there's situations where there are times where guys do get lucky and end up in victory lane, but then there's other times where you actually have to be good and lucky at the same time. And Ryan, I guess, was good twice.
Yeah.
So on the flip side of Ryan Reed, there's a huge story going on right now about Bubba Wallace. It broke actually last week. How he had mentioned in one of the press conferences at was it Kansas or the week before Kansas?
It was.
It
was
before,
at.
Right?
No, it was. Where were we last week? Kansas. It was the week before.
the week before. Wherever we were. Was it Martin's?
No,
Richmond.
Dover.
Was it Richmond? Dover. Yes, it was Dover.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. I was going to call you Ryan. You can be Ryan if you want. Anyway,
why don't you go call him late for dinner? He's
exactly.
Okay.
At Dover, he broke down in tears during the press conference or whatever. He was mentioning he was battling depression.
Yeah.
And it's a huge story that I'm sure has a lot more levels and a lot more layers to it than what everybody knows. But I feel like a part of it probably is performance. Because he's with. As much as Ryan Reed, we talk about Ryan Reed and Roush and being under the pressure from having to drive with an organization like Roush, Bubba Wallace is driving for Richard Petty, which is it used to be the standard premier, one of the standard premier rides back in the early days, but then even now there's plenty of guys that have come through that organization that have been successful, and now Bubba Wallace is struggling, being 28th in points and barely cracking the top 15. Week after week, and I think that's part of it, but I'm sure there's more to it than that. But, I mean,
Well, the hard part about depression is that it really doesn't need a match.
Right.
It doesn't need, a spark to light that flame, and as someone who's been there, I can say that it's really, really, you're right. There's a lot more to it. It's never just one thing.
It's really nobody's business, though, really.
Well,
I mean,
but
to a certain extent.
The fact that Bubba was willing, to come out and from my point of view here, look, I don't want to disparage the folks who work at Richard Petty Motorsports at all, because they're working their butts off to try and make things better. But again, money talks in this sport, and that team is probably one of the least funded teams in total in the Cup Garage right now. They struggle to get real good big time sponsors, and because of that, you get into a situation where you can't replenish parts as fast. You can't build as many cars. You can't have as many engineers you probably want to have. There are things that you have to really watch every penny, and you can't fake it till you make it at the Cup level.
That's right.
And, for whatever reason, and it's completely beyond me, and I've had an ongoing discussion with people all week long about this topic. Bubba's just not performing. Bubba's not doing this. Bubba's not showing it. Look you can't take a 25th place car and make it a 5th place car. That car right now, that team is struggling to get inside the top 20.
Right.
And it's the equipment, and it's not necessarily lack of ability to make the equipment faster. It's lack of resources.
Right.
You can't get the best engines. You can't get the best parts that you need. So you really have to do things a different way. Now, why on earth Wall Street has not fallen all over the combination of the sports king and Bubba Wallace, I don't know. It is a complete mystery to me, because I know Bubba. I've known Bubba for a long time, since he was in Bandoleros, for crying out loud. And I know his character, and I know what kind of a marketable person he is. I know how much fun he is. I know how passionate he is. Mm-hmm. And he's shown at every single level, other than Cup, he has shown that he can win races when he's in top equipment. He would do no differently in the Cup Series. but for whatever reason, the team has struggled to find the kind of sponsors they need, and that's what's holding back the performance. This is not a Bubba Wallace issue. If anything, I think he's guilty of maybe sometimes trying a little too hard.
Right.
But that's never a bad thing
No,
to
that's
be,
a good call today.
right? I mean, I'd much
today.
rather have somebody who gives a little too much effort and, pushes a little too hard and he crashes the car, and then somebody says, "Well, see, he can't drive. He crashed. Well, he's trying to get that extra spot."
Right.
You know?
What bothers me the most, I think, is that I know a lot of people who own small businesses, and it's really hard for them to be able to market their business without being labeled racist or being labeled whatever, because
Right.
if they use certain marketing materials that don't have a certain color of skin in it, then they're labeled as being racist. Or if they don't market to a certain genre of people, then they're being labeled as, whatever. And like you said, it's hard for me to understand why you have Richard Petty Motorsports, who is one of the biggest, if not the biggest name in our sport, with a team that's underfunded, with a driver who is a minority. I don't understand the dynamic that doesn't allow. You would be thinking that team would have millions of dollars coming in toward it, because what company wouldn't want to have a guy like Bubba Wallace be the spokesman for your brand?
I think that's kind of the point for me. It's not even that he is a minority; it's the fact that he is who he is.
Right.
He is the kind of person he is. He is. He's fun. He's energetic. He's kind of edgy at times. I mean, my goodness, the kid plays drums. His online personality is amazing.
Right.
I mean, he just loves to go race, and he's trying so hard to make something out of this situation.
Mm-hmm.
And, so when I consider who he is, and obviously who Richard Petty is, I mean, Richard built this sport. Bill France Sr. and Richard Petty, to me, are the two singular people who pretty much built this sport,
right.
the NASCAR part of the sport. Mm-hmm. And so, for me, this just should be a no-brainer. For a company that wants excitement and energy and somebody to represent it who's young and fresh and appealable to the kind of demographic that I think NASCAR is trying to reach right now. And I don't understand it. But until that happens, unfortunately, the performance is not going to improve. And there really isn't. You can't blame anybody other than, it's the lack of resources and not necessarily lack of talent or lack of effort, because that team, I know, works awfully hard every week to go out and put the best piece on the track they can. And some weeks it's better than others. He'll qualify well, but then he gets into a race and, it's a whole different thing to be one car on the track than 40.
So, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I could have sworn that I read the story a few years ago that Ford had actually asked Richard Petty to go back to Ford from where they were, with the promise that they were going to help them with resources. Am I wrong in that?
Well,
because I don't feel like Ford's helping them at all. I mean,
they're Chevy now, obviously.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Didn't they go back to Chevy?
Yeah, they went back to
Ford
Chevy.
wasn't helping them?
They're now a part of the Richard Childress compound,
that's what
but
I
I
thought.
don't think there is necessarily a direct, correlation between the two. I think there's
not a satellite team.
Yeah, they're not a satellite team, but they're on sort of in a corner of the,
right.
No, they went back to Chevy last year, and, I think Ford was for a while, and, again, things change.
Of course.
Times change, things change, and, it's a sad reality that we face when, the first face of the sport has a car, that can't be competitive.
Right.
And you can put Kevin Harvick in that car. It may go a little faster than it goes with Bubba, because Kevin's had so much more experience, but I promise you he's not going out win.
Right.
You can't, everybody looks and says, well, look at Ross Chastain did the other night. Listen, Ross Chastain and Nice Motorsports are getting a whole lot of help from GMS right now. That is a technical alliance that's growing, and basically Ross won that race with a solid top 10 truck. Right. He didn't win it with a 20th place truck.
Exactly.
You can't Bubba, the only thing Bubba can do is go out and try and just get the best finish every week he can get and finish races with that car and just, do the best he can and try not to, to be out of races. And that's very frustrating. especially for a driver like Bubba who knows he's got an obstacle automatically to overcome, but then, you add to that he gets into this high-profile situation where the resources just aren't there to live up to the hype, and now he's the one that bears the brunt of it. Yep. Nobody's attacking the crew chief or the car chief or the, whoever, right?
He's the one behind the wheel.
The driver,
right.
The driver always gets the brunt of it.
Yep.
So, I've got to believe that there's a lot for him, and he's not somebody who just wants to do this for a paycheck.
Right.
He's very passionate. He wears his emotions on his sleeve, and I love that about him.
Yep.
And, very honestly, we're not supposed to be biased, but I can promise you that if I could pick who goes out of the All-Star Open and gets the fan vote, if he doesn't win the All-Star Open, I'd pick him Bubba.
Yeah.
Because I just think the guy deserves the shot. And, that's really where it's at. I feel bad for him right now, and I feel bad for that whole group. Because it's not lack of effort. They just don't have the resources.
Right. So if Bubba will do Bubba, then Bubba will be okay.
Yeah.
In the end, somebody will take a chance.
Yeah.
There's
I
always
hope
somebody.
they do. And I love the sponsors they got, and I'm sure they're giving as much as they can and feel they, can give or whatever. But, he really needs that one big one.
Yeah.
That can be the base.
Get him a top 10 at least instead of a top 20.
Be the base.
So speaking of the All-Star race, of course, everyone knows this is All-Star race weekend. This kicks off the 10 Days of Thunder, and we got the 600 coming up, and there's all kinds of events going on, in and around the Mooresville, Charlotte, area over the next 10 days. So I wanted to spend the last half of this show talking about the All-Star race, because this is a conversation that people have every single year about, why is the All-Star race in Charlotte every year, which we'll get to in a minute. But first I want to talk about the format, because the format has changed so many times over the last 5 years. I don't even know what the format is this year. But I feel like they change it on a dime, and they just draw random rules out of a hat and go, "Ooh, I like this one. Let's pick this one. Let's write that one on the board." And we're going to go with that one this year. So I know it has something to do with previous winners of the All-Star race, and is it race winners or pole winners? It's race winners, correct?
So, let's
hold on. I got to get a piece of construction paper and a pen.
Yeah, exactly.
A crayon or something.
Quiz on this later. So basically, here's the deal. In order to be eligible to run in the All-Star race, you have to have one or more of the following criteria be true.
Jesus.
Either a 2018 or 2019 points race winner.
Okay.
A past All-Star race winner. A past Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series champion, or the winner of the fan vote. Now, of course, if you aren't any of those, then if you win the Open, they take so many out of the Open.
There's always an asterisk.
Each stage winner from the Open moves into the All-Star race. It's $1 million race, and here's how they break it down by segment. 30 laps stage 1, 20 laps stage 2, 20 laps stage 3, and 15 laps stage 4. There is no mandatory pit rule. Green and yellow count in the first 3 stages. Only green flag laps count in the final stage. NASCAR overtime rules will be in effect for the first 3 stages. For the final stage, if the race is restarted with less than 2 laps remaining, there will be unlimited green-white checkered attempts under green flag conditions. So basically, we're not going to end this race under caution. That's pretty much what they're saying. Single car qualifying will be implemented this weekend, with the ever-popular no speed limit pit stops returning for All-Star race qualifying. So if you're going to qualify for the All-Star race, you're already in the All-Star race and you're doing the qualifying for that, no speed limit pit stop, same as we've had in the past, basically.
Right.
Yeah. So that's how that works. So they've kind of, over the years, they've expanded who gets to get in the All-Star race. I've never been, to me, I feel like the All-Star race right now, I feel like it's too long, and I feel like there's too many segments. There's just, to me, I always think the All-Star race ought to be something radically different and radically shorter and radically more geared toward, whoever can push the pedal the hardest is going to get the win.
Right.
I'm not...
Keep it simple.
Yeah. It's because I've always been a purist when it comes to the Clash race that happens at the beginning of the year at Daytona, too. When the Busch Clash started years ago, there were only about 10 cars. It was only the pole winners the year before. It was like a 10-car, 20-lap dash.
Right.
Go. And they broke it in half, and they inverted the order. Go.
Right.
It was just a quick, sprint kind of race. We didn't confuse it with a lot of segments or pit stops or whatever. Just, short race, 2 halves, go. And I thought it was great. I think they've kind of complicated the race, but the problem is, over the years, as the cars have evolved, as you and I have discussed many times on our other shows, Randy, the racing on the mile and a halves,
right.
Becomes good or bad or worse or better or whatever, and so and now to make it even more sort of confusing for the fans, NASCAR over the last few years has decided to use the All-Star race as pretty much a science experiment.
A guinea pig.
Yeah. So we're trying a package that we might implement for next year, again, this year. And so it's going to be a bit different. They're putting a new radiator duct into the cars, which exits through the hood, not into the engine compartment. What they're hoping to do is create improved aerodynamic parity and reduce the temperatures of the motors. And that's kind of an attempt to see how it's going to work. They may implement it in 2021 when the Gen 7 stock car comes out. It's a lot like the package we have this year. 550 horse, kind of like we had at Kansas. Again, the difference being the new radiator duct. That's something they're trying. So we won't know how that's going to work till we get to the track and race.
If it's anything like Kansas, then,
Well, that's what we can hope for, right? I mean, that really is for.
If we're going to go to that spectrum, let's go to that end of the spectrum and not the far end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So if you were in charge of NASCAR and NASCAR came to you right now and said, okay, you can do the format however you want to for 2020, what would you make the format?
See, to me, if you're going to keep it on at Charlotte, which we'll get to debating that later. But if you're going to keep it in Charlotte, the thing that always seems to happen, last year we had an amazing race. I mean, the passing, and it was great. But then what we had was, once again, we had a situation where in the last segment, when you're waiting for that drama and you're waiting for that big finish, the leader was able to pull out just enough so that everybody could pass everybody else, but you could get to the leader, but you couldn't run by him. Mm-hmm. And so they're trying to change that by making the segment a little longer, from 10 to 15 laps, final segment. Again, for me, I'm not a big fan of so many segments. I understand that you want to have, you want to get them there and you want to entertain, but you got the All-Star Open, and you run that in stages, you do all of that. By the time you get to the All-Star race, for me, I'm capping it at Charlotte anyway. I'm capping it at 50 laps. And I'm going 25 and 25. And the deal is you don't get a pit stop. You don't get to change tires. You don't get to do anything. If the fuel window can be 50 laps, this is what we're doing. And at the end of lap 25, we're inverting, and here's what I'm doing. In order to keep people from sandbagging, I'm going to go out and find somebody who is willing to put up some pretty big-time leader lap money. So first, second, and third pay some hefty lap money to be in those positions all the way through the race. So you don't want to be sandbagging. So maybe it's, whoever leads the most laps in the first half gets, $250,000 or something. Right. I mean, you got to make this so that it's a flat out, go nuts race.
Yep.
Which sort of, because to me, the last great All-Star race was one hot night. When they first put it, the race with Kyle and Davey Allison, that to me was the last really dramatic, really fantastic All-Star race that we've had. And you don't want to do too much to manufacture it, but at the same time, you don't want these cars just going and spreading out. You don't want people sandbagging in the back and trying to manipulate the rules. So you got to make it as simple as possible, and yet you got to make it as difficult as possible for drivers not to be racing for the lead, because that's what fans want. They don't want drivers half a lap off the pace.
I feel like a lot of what happened with the All-Star race is that it lost its, like, because I feel like growing up in the 80s, It was all about all or nothing. It's either
Right.
you win the race and win $1 million, or you get nothing.
Right.
And they used that mentality for all the commercials and all the press
Yep.
and all the promo stuff for it, and it made it an exciting race because you wanted to tune in to see. Because I felt like the drivers were more, like they were willing to take more chances and take more risk and
Yes.
do more
Yep.
damage, quote unquote,
Yep.
in order to get to the $1 million because it was such a huge thing to win the $1 million. And now it's just kind of been like, oh, it's just like another race on the schedule
Right.
for most of these guys. So I feel like we need to get back to that, all or nothing mentality. And I've been kicking around the idea of, I used to love IROC back when IROC was
Yes.
happening. And I thought, there's so much talk right now of, Penske being dominant and JGR being dominant.
Yep.
That maybe we should have a manufacturer, even if it's an outside manufacturer, which I know, is going to get people going, no. But have identically prepared cars like IROC, so
Right.
that nobody can touch them, nobody can mess with them. There can't be influence from Ford, Chevy, Toyota, whatever. It's the same 20 cars, or how many cars you're going to have. Have them go out in front of it on a stage, draw a number. That's where you start, like the shootout used to be, a couple
Right.
years ago. And I like your idea of 50 laps, 25, invert the field. Don't tell anybody what number you're going to invert it to. Just go up in the stands and pick some kid and be like, draw a number, whatever number you draw. That's how many cars get inverted. Boom, done. And then go for it. And don't just take the complication out of it, because that's what people are getting turned off about, is all these rules changes and
Right.
stage stages, and
Yep.
we don't need any of that stuff. And I feel like you should do the Open on the Friday night, either before or after the truck race. The Saturday should be all about the all-star race, not the Open, not the whatever.
See, I don't
it should
know.
be.
I'll be honest.
Also-
I love the fact that Saturday, because first of all, you got to remember that you got the truck race on Friday. So
True.
by the time you start that at
That's
8:30,
It'd be 12 midnight by the
it'd be
time you're
midnight
done.
before you start.
Yeah.
But I love the fact it's an all-day event, and I think the fact that it is an all-day event is a good reason why they could actually shorten the race and try to come up with
That's
some
true.
sort of a format that's simple. And like I said, you put all the money up front. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't pay to be running around in the back. We don't want drivers. I saw drivers do that the last few years, and it's kind of like, it was like, I don't want to see that. That's not why I came here.
Right, exactly. It's like qualifying in California.
Yeah, I mean, it should. So you make it so that they're not incentivized to manipulate the system, because there really is no way to do that unless you just really don't want to run for a bunch of money.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, they could also have you were talking about having, big money sponsors supply money for the who lead the most laps or whatever.
Yeah.
They could also have a situation where a company just picks a random number, like a random place within the top 15 or whatever, and 12th place you're going to get an extra $100,000 or whatever just for finishing 12th.
As long as we can tell them before.
Right, exactly. Yeah, don't tell them that's where
Yeah.
it's going to be. Just at the end of the 25 laps, say, hey,
Right.
congratulations, so and so, you finished 20th place, and
Right.
this.
The other
sponsor's
thing you
giving
could
money.
do is, what do they call this? There's a name for this, and I can't remember. Maybe you will. What is it when you have a race where you go a lap down, or the car in last place has to go off every so often? What is the name of that?
It's
something Grand Prix.
Yeah, I can't.
I
think
can't
of it.
remember what the name of
I
it
used to
is.
hate those in video games all the time because I was always listening.
But maybe you, maybe you could do that with the All-Star race. So if you're running last, at the end of the
kinda like
first
Survivor
stage,
or something,
you have to.
Survival.
So again, you can't sandbag.
Right, exactly.
You know-
if you're the last car on the track, then
Yeah.
you get black flagged and you
Yeah,
get
you're not
sent
gonna.
off there.
You just gotta make it so that it's to me, it should be a flat-out race of skill.
Right.
And we should be making it really. We should be making it really hard not to be running for the lead.
Right. Well, it's
You know?
just like in years past that they brought the whole pit stop thing into play, and I feel like we see that enough during the regular season where the pit
Well,
crews play a
that's
huge
kind of
role.
my point too.
And I feel like we should go back to doing the pit crew competition like they had in years past, because it's their own separate
Right.
competition for those guys
Right.
to show their skills.
Right.
And they get maybe the winner of the pit crew competition gets a number one spot in the pit road or whatever whatever the case may be. Like there should be some incentive for those guys to do well, but there should be their own separate competition for those
I agree.
guys. So that
I'm
they
not a
can have
fan
their
of pit
own.
stops in these special
Yeah, it
races.
should be all about the
Any more than
driver.
Clash.
And that's it.
Yep.
So we last week on Motorsports Fans, we talked about the All-Star race, and I was in the minority. Everybody said the race should stay in Charlotte. But to plead my case, we talked about it a little bit. I feel like NASCAR's wanted to be entertainment, and if you're going to be entertainment, then you need to spread the entertainment to other places. So I had brought up the idea, okay, well, maybe we don't run the All-Star Race at a track that NASCAR visits every year, because that would also, in turn, maybe stop people from being so, like, relying on notes and stuff from years past in order to be good. If you go to a neutral track, like maybe in Iowa, or someplace where NASCAR doesn't actually go, although some of the Xfinity drivers have ran there, but go to a track that's maybe NASCAR sanctioned, but not necessarily a track that they visit all the time, it would be more of a neutral ground. I heard a rumor that Nashville actually is being talked about as a possible place to put the All-Star Race, since they're already putting the banquet there, and SMI is putting like $60 million worth of improvements into the track.
Now, that's an interesting thought. I'm not a big advocate of moving it from Charlotte, only because
it is driving distance, though.
Well, see, this is this is where I was going. Is I'm not an advocate of moving it from Charlotte, mostly because I believe you put the All-Star Race. This isn't baseball.
Right.
You know, we have a clearly defined sort of home area, and I think this is why now, if they moved it to Martinsville, or they moved it to Bristol, or they moved it to Nashville, that would be fine. Because, again, you're 2 hours, or you're 4 hours, or Nashville, I think the fairgrounds is about 5, maybe. You know, it's not bad. It could be done. Now, there's a lot of work to be done in Nashville. There's still they're a long way from a deal to make all the stuff happen they're trying to do. But in fact, I was just reading some more on it today. The town and the fairgrounds and all that. There are a lot of moving pieces that are in play there. They're trying to build a soccer stadium. They got resident houses or apartments or whatever they are in that area now with the fairgrounds. So there's a lot of things that are going on. But that would be an awesome way. To me, if you're going to move it from Charlotte, it goes on a short track. And again, you got to set this up so that it's an all-out throwdown.
Yes.
You can't. This is why I'm not even in favor of pit stops. You got to make this so that it's all about driving, because these are supposed to be the best of the best in NASCAR. So if that's the case, make them prove it. Mm-hmm. You know, and it should look like a Saturday night short track race. I've been hoping for years that Charlotte would somehow build a half-mile or so oval on the grounds at Charlotte Motor Speedway to go with all the other tracks they got. It's the only thing they don't have. And I've been hoping for years they would do that, because there again, you take that race and you throw it on the short track and go, okay, now we're going to,
right,
exactly. Now it's an all-star race.
Yep.
For me to move it to Iowa or some other, you know, I feel like it loses some of the appeal because it's not in the home area.
Nobody's going to go to Iowa for an All-Star.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it's just not. It's a different type of deal than baseball,
right?
You know, or the Pro Bowl's been kind of.
I just hate that NASCAR always compares us to stick and ball sports. Like, you know, we're trying to because we're entertainment. Okay,
and
we
again,
are entertainment.
That's part of it too, right? Because how do you choose? You know, the criteria they use to pick who gets to race the All-Star race. I mean, it's you know, a good bit of your field now.
Yeah.
You know, it isn't. So it's hard. It's hard to sort of construct that. Mm-hmm. You know, the fan vote is nothing but popularity.
Right.
You know, it doesn't always. I mean, you get. You know, God bless Josh Wise, but I mean, come on. You know, you had Danica Patrick. How many years did she? You know, so it's not always. It's often just popularity. So it's just hard to make a legitimate all-star race in NASCAR, and I feel like so I think it's okay at Charlotte. I just think that you need to settle on a format that makes it as much about driving as possible and as little about anything else.
Right. It should be about the entertainment, because I noticed in recent years, like, they do the driver introduction thing, which is really cool, you know, because it kind of seems like it's a different type of, it's more like WWE-esque when they do it, you know, for the All-Star race, because they put more emphasis on, you know, entertaining the fans and making it seem more like an All-Star event when you have an All-Star cast of drivers. But then when the All-Star race starts, you do have some of the top drivers who don't make it because either they had a bad year or they didn't get the fan vote or they went open or whatever. And it's like, okay, well, if you're going to create the ultimate All-Star race, then you need to make sure that all of the All-Stars are in the race, whether you throw out the whole format about whether you win a race or not, because the way that the format is now with winning races or winning whatever is going to be really hard, because it's literally you're usually the same 16 drivers, or give or take a couple of drivers, but it's the same team of it's JGR and Hendrick and for years and years and years. So maybe you just take out that whole concept and either do a complete fan vote and say the top 20 drivers and fan votes get in or whatever, or make it. It just seems like the format is unfair for guys who don't have like your Bubba Wallaces who are driving for undefended teams who are lesser funded teams who may not be able to make it into the race by winning the Open, because the chances of them winning a race that, I mean, if you take out, the Brad Keselowskis and the Joey Logano's and Kyle Busches, then obviously you have a chance. But I just feel like we've lost that whole, I guess, luck of the draw, fan vote or whatever, and it needs to be more about.
See, I don't know. The problem with the fan vote now, like I said, it's all popularity, and you get the situation where, and again, bless the folks from Reddit, but you get a situation where, they somehow stack the deck that one year got Josh Wise in there, and I just think that takes. How do you define all-stars?
I'm pretty sure Josh gave away his firstborn child, though, whenever he was.
And look, I was happy for him.
I really don't think this year you're going to see anybody be able to stack the competition, because this fan vote this year is stacked. I mean, you've got Daniel Hemrick who could win it. You've got William Byron who can win it. You've got Alex Bowman who can win it. Bubba Wallace who can win it. There's a lot of people where I'm sitting here looking at this all-star fan vote list, and I'm like, there's a lot of stacked popular drivers in this event where it's like, I don't know who's going to win.
But see, I think you said the key word, popular. I love Daniel Hemrick. I've known him since Bandoleros. But is he an all-star? Are we kind of
when
just
you stack Bubba Wallace up against Junior Nation with Alex Bowman, you're going to have a pretty tough time getting him in there.
Well, there again, it's like some of these guys. So it's just hard. I think you have to sort of suspend disbelief with the All-Star thing, and not worry about who the All-Stars are so much as can we put on a good show. Right. I don't think any of us care. I was happy to see Josh Wise get in. That team needed it, right? But I think you just want to come up with a format that works and keep it consistent. Mm-hmm. And, because the All-Star race ought to be radically different from what we see on a weekly basis. And that's why I'm not crazy about the 3 or 4 segments, and I'm not crazy about, I think you just need to take pit stops out of it, make it short and sweet, and go get your money.
Right. Well, like Chris was saying, that with the fan vote, though, I mean, yes, the field is stacked as far as fan votes go. But like if you look at other sports like baseball, you're handed a ballot, 3 weeks into the season with a list of names on it for each position, and go, okay, choose your favorite. But there's only like 5 people on the list. Yeah. It's like, what if my favorite player isn't on that list? So maybe to make it more fair, you don't. I mean, obviously, you have the people like your Chase Elliott, who would if he was whatever ballot he's going to win, because he's the new Dale Jr. of the most popular driver contest. But I think there are certain instances like a guy like Kyle Busch probably isn't going to win any fan votes anytime soon. He's getting more popular though, as each passing year. I think people are starting to.
And you got to think this year in particular has become like a politician's race. I mean, you've got Daniel Hemrick doing the Tour de North Carolina. He's going to Kannapolis and Concord and Charlotte.
Which, see, I think that's funny.
And he's got Tyler Reddick as a campaign manager. And, as your point to Josh Wise with Reddit, Matt DiBenedetto's doing the same thing.
Right.
He's even employed the guys at JGR to help him get the votes. So this is about as political as NASCAR gets this time of year, trying to go on their campaigns to, hey, vote me in.
See, and that's funny. That's what social media brings into this, is it gives the opportunity to go do this kind of stuff and everybody to have fun with it. Yep, I agree. Right. Yep.
And I tell you, if Alex Bowman does win that fan vote and he makes it in, I'd watch him finishing second 3 consecutive times in a row.
Well, Alex, I think will get in from the Open.
Yeah, if he doesn't win the All-Star race, he's probably not picked to win the 600, but we'll talk about that when the time comes. All right, so this week's hometown track, I'm going to do my track, because last week we did Tom's track, and this week we're going to do my track, and then eventually Blake Harris is going to be here, and we're going to let him do East Lincoln. But for now, we'll do my track because this is kind of where I grew up. But Kennedale Speedway Park is our hometown track of the week. It's a quarter-mile semi-banked dirt oval. It's not the track I grew up in because unfortunately that track closed. But the other track is literally like, and I know we don't have cameras, but for Tom's reference, your phone and my phone are the two tracks.
Right.
They're literally a parking lot apart. Because one track was built because the other one, they thought the other one was going out of business, and so then they ended up having two tracks, but one was IMCA and one was not IMCA, and they ran on the same time. So yeah, it was. But I figured out that if you went to, because they were like, there was one track at the top of the hill, one track at the bottom of the hill. So if you went to the very top of the bleachers and sat down, you can actually watch both races at the same time. So you pay for one, but then got to see the other one free. Because when they were on a break, you just turn around and see what's going on the other.
That's awesome.
Little secret. I don't live there anymore, so I don't have to worry about that anymore. But anyway, they race on Saturday nights, IMCA sanctioned. They race modifieds, stock cars, sport mods, sport compacts, which I didn't know was a thing, but apparently it is, and factory stocks. Junior minis race on most nights, but I know this weekend they're not because they're racing dwarf cars, which dwarf cars on dirt is still kind of weird to me because now that I'm here, it's all asphalt, but they're
dwarf cars still run dirt. There's dwarf to legends.
That is true.
Two different cars.
That is true. Anyway, they $13 is the admission fee. They race through November. They actually have all kinds of cool stuff. They're having a trailer race, which they introduced a couple of years ago. If you've never seen a trailer race, that's to me the most fascinating and fantastic thing that you could ever see. And demolition derbies, which I know me and you have talked about this before. I don't understand why tracks here don't have that. I mean, I guess it's insurance. But there's not a lot of tracks around here that do it. I mean, I guess since NASCAR's based here, it's pretty much like a weekly demolition derby sometimes. But
some tracks.
At some tracks, but not so much anymore. But most of the dirt tracks here don't do them, and all the dirt tracks down there did them. And they always had. As a matter of fact, 2 years ago, all the dirt tracks got together and had basically a championship, like demolition derby championship. So each week or every 3 weeks, each track would host one, and at the end of the year, whoever won the most would win $10,000 or whatever like that. So we always had. I actually got to participate in one year, which is the scariest but yet most exciting thing you've ever done in your life, because the track was actually filming a commercial for. I know we have to go, Chris. See. For those of you who don't, because I know we don't have video, so this show is different because I'm usually on the other side of the in the tech shed, but now Chris gets that job, so now he's telling me what to do, and I know he gets a thrill out of that.
But it's your show, your rules, so you can call overtime if you want.
I can call overtime if I want to. What time? It's 9 o'clock.
Chris's job is just to keep you informed.
We'll leave in a minute, Chris. I was on a roll. Anyway, I got to participate in a demolition derby a few years ago because they were filming a commercial for some insurance thing, which. By the way, it was literally a commercial for two different insurance companies, but they made a pact to come together to film a commercial about body injury or something in an accident. And so they asked some of the drivers to participate because the idea was we were going to start the demolition derby and we were going to run into each other for 2 or 3 minutes and then get off get out of the way. It didn't work like that. The demolition derby drivers thought we were part of the demolition derby, and we ended up being in the derby. Scariest thing you've ever seen in your entire life, and I was sore for about 3 weeks after that. So, but it's really cool, and so you can check out raceksb.com or the Facebook page for all the information on Kennedale Speedway Park. So, next week we are not going to be on the air because of everything going on here in the Charlotte area with the 600 weekend, and there's a big race at Millbridge going on, and there's a bunch of other stuff, festivals, and all kinds of stuff going on in the area.
I will put it like I put it to somebody earlier. Every national series besides IndyCar and F1 that you could ever think of is here this week.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's a lot of things going on, and all the drivers are busy. So getting somebody to come on the show is nearly impossible right now. So we're going to take next week off so that everybody can go and have fun at Charlotte and do whatever, celebrate, I guess, the beginning of Memorial Day weekend, because some people probably will take the entire weekend off. And I think, actually, since the trucks are on, or Xfinity's on Saturday night, so don't they qualify on Thursday night or something?
Exit poll night next week is Thursday for the Cup race.
So everybody will be there.
Is Saturday afternoon, and then the sprint cars are racing both Friday and Saturday night. The World of Outlaws on the dirt track. So, yeah,
so awesome.
That's, yep.
So a lot of stuff. There's a lot of other things going on at the dirt track. So anyway, so we're going to take next week off. We'll be back in 2 weeks with more of the Inside Pass. So for Chris and Tom, I'm Randy. We'll see you guys next week. Oh, not next week. 2 weeks from tonight on the Inside Pass. You guys have a great